I now call to order the special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. It is Tuesday, February 14, 2023. Happy Valentine's Day. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair.
There we go. Mr. Holt.
Here.
Mr. Presberdia.
Here.
Ms. Dern.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Sweet.
Mr. Sweet is excused.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Ms. Zalatow.
Here.
Mr. Cross.
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Volant.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Vice Chair, would you read the land acknowledgement, please?
A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands we now occupy. It's an actionable statement that marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. With gratitude and respect, we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today for this special meeting. When the Assembly approved the emergency ordinance regarding contracting and procurements on January 20, we made a commitment to hold special meetings as necessary to ensure that the operations of the municipality would continue and not be unnecessarily impacted due to any inabilities to bring time-sensitive items forward such that they couldn't make the next regular agenda. So we have 10 items before us today. The first 3 are actually legislative items that I believe were just, one of them is time-sensitive and the others added to this since the focus is on procurement and contracts. And we could make a motion to suspend the rules and treat this as a consent agenda. However, I believe it is the intent of the body to go ahead and take up each item individually. So we now have before us item 4A, Assembly Memorandum number AM 84-2023, sole source grant agreement with the Federation of Community Councils for 2023 personnel and operations support services for the municipality of Anchorage legislative branch. What is the will of the body?
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant, seconded by Ms. Zalatow. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thanks. I'm not recommending this for this year, but it's certainly something we should look at. The value of the $90,000 hasn't changed, I think, in so many years. And so we might, at some future interval, have a conversation about what services are delivered by the Federation and what the proper level of compensation is, probably a small increase.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 84-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Holt.
Yes.
We'll come. Thank you, Mr. Salt. Mr. Presberdia.
Yeah.
Ms. Dern.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance.
Yes.
Mr. Constant.
Yes, just so the recording catches it, Mr. Salt voted yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4B, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 85-2023, Amendment Number 2 to contract with Agnew Beck, PO 2022-002314, to provide professional services for alcoholic beverages retail sales tax outreach program. Legislative branch. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 85-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Garcia?
Yeah.
Ms. Dern?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4C, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 105-2023, Amendment Number 1 to sole source contract with Anchorage Daily News, PO 2022-003412 for advertising of 2023 Assembly appointments, regular election notices, and special election notices for the municipality of Anchorage. Office of the Municipal Clerk. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Seeing no members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 105-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Garcia?
Yeah.
Ms. Dern?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we move on, I just want to note that these are all consent agenda items, and as we have stated before at prior special assembly meetings of this kind, none of them are public hearing items. We now have before us item 4D, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 106-2023, Amendment Number 2 to the sole source contract with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for construction of ADOT and PFC FHWY 00647 AMATS Dowling Road and 3rd Avenue, November 2018 earthquake repairs. Project Management and Engineering. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatel and seconded by Mr. Constant. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question on this item. I'm curious why this one was set for the special meeting. Was it just because we had the special meeting, or is there a timeliness factor to it? Thank you.
Through the chair, one, we were taking advantage of the special meeting, but also this was on, I think it was submitted to me and on base for the, not the last meeting, but the previous one. I missed it then and missed it during the second one, so my fault.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 106-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Garcia?
Yeah.
Ms. Dern?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Ms. Solotel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4E, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 107-2023, recommendation of award to Wolverine Supply, Inc. for Girdwood Wastewater Treatment Facility aeration system blower upgrades for the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatal, seconded by Ms. Quinn Davidson. Is there any discussion? Ms. Zalatal?
Thanks, and I'm gonna ask this question kind of throughout, if this is something that was urgent or it's just a function of the opportunity. One of the things I'm trying to get a sense of is the effect of the emergency ordinance and if it's causing delays in work or additional precedents. Thanks.
Through the chair, again, we're taking advantage of having this special meeting. This one, David Persinger is here from AO, he can speak to yours. As I recall, this is an urgent, or a high priority item for them. So David, would you? Yeah, come up to the microphone.
So this is a bit of word. Sorry, this is a bit of word that's we need to word it sooner than later because of the time frames required for awarding bids. Not working.
Just need to make sure the microphone is close enough. Ms. Zalatal, do you have any other questions?
No, I appreciate that. I guess I see in the memorandum, it was originally set to purchasing on January 4th, so it's been pending for approximately a month and a half at this point. So I'm glad it's brought forward so that we don't have to go out and rebid it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Does this relate to the repairs that you've heard about needed for the fluoridation system up in River?
No, this is related to the wastewater plant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Constant. Do members have any other questions? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 107-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Salt,
Yes.
Mr. Presberdia,
Yes.
Ms. Stearns,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Ms. Zalatal,
Yes.
Mr. Cross,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion is approved 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4F, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 108-2023, recommendation of award of a purchase order with Millipore Sigma to furnish MILLI0Q1X 7003 water purification system to the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatal and seconded by Mr. Constant. I did not know if that was 1X or 9. Do members have any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Zalatal.
Thanks. So I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of the timing of these items. So this memorandum is January 24, 2023. I guess what's the expectation from the time that you submit a memorandum to purchasing for them to make it in front of us? Is it a 2-week period, a 4-week period, just so we get a sense of what the expectation is from a department? Thanks.
Through the chair, I'd say it varies depending on the complexity of the item. There was a lot of things that were in the queue here for the last regular meetings. I think this one was in the queue that got pushed off, so it's a process to go through, but with all the stuff, especially for beginning of the year thing, There's a lot of work to go on, so it can take some time to get things through the system, through our system at the utility, as well as through City Hall.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Any other questions? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 108-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Mr. Sol,
Yes.
Mr. Presbydia,
Yeah.
Ms. Stern,
Yeah.
Mr. Rivera,
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Ms. Alatal,
Yes.
Mr. Cross,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4G, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 109-2023, recommendation of award of a non-encumbered contract with Beacon Occupational Health and Safety Services, Inc. for consulting services for health and safety auditing for the municipality of Anchorage, multiple departments. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second. A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Alatal. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. So at the time we updated or approved the audit plan, I asked for us to include a workers' comp audit. And in the process, realized I hadn't included the OSHA language that I had intended to go into that request. And I talked with Mr. Chadwick, and he had offered that this audit was coming to our compliance with the OSHA requirements and all of the issues that are related to that. And so I underscored this because I understand that this issue is one that in the not too distant future we will probably be hearing a lot more about. So just put your seatbelts on.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Alatal?
Thank you. I have two questions. It says recommended by Program and Policy Director. What department is that? That's my first question.
Through the chair, Kelly Crothers is the safety program manager. She works in the manager's office. So I think this is her first time preparing an AM, and I didn't catch that. My apologies.
No problem. And then my second question is this $14,000 something that's anticipated as part of the operating budget for this department?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Actually, I have a question, Mr. Colby's. I thought Ms. Carruthers was the safety director, equivalent to a department head.
Madam Chair, I'd have to check. I don't believe safety is a standalone department. It exists under the manager's office, similar to the risk division.
Okay, thank you. And could you talk a little bit about what sorts of services they will be providing? We had briefing, maybe too strong a word, but with the prior municipal manager, an indication of a need for perhaps more resources, and this is a pretty small contract.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'm not sure if Kelly's on the phone. She had an unexpected appointment today. I'll give her a moment to see if she's on. I suspect she's not. So this is, my understanding is this is the outcome of previous interactions with OSHA, and there was a specific commitment to hire a firm. The municipality committed to hire a firm to conduct auditing of safety plans and compliance efforts, and this is just a 1-month effort to do that. I can find out if we anticipate future contract actions, but this was a specific requirement for compliance with the OSHA finding.
Thank you, Mr. Colhase. Go ahead, Ms. Alatal.
Thank you. So this is where a memorandum or something additional to give us that context in the item would be really helpful, because I didn't pick up that this was in response to a particular OSHA issue, unless I missed it. But that seems to not only, I underscore the importance of the item, but also that there's an issue that we might need to be aware of. And so I just wanted to provide that feedback. And I understand this may be the first one of these that she's prepared, but the context for why we're authorizing services, not just what we're authorizing, I think is a very important thing for us to know when these items come before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Mr. Cross?
Yeah, the clarification would be helpful, but now I recall those conversations with the previous municipal manager. Probably about 6 or 7 months ago, we had OSHA issues, and she had mentioned that we had seen this and this was coming. So, but I agree, and I do recall the OSHA concerns. Thank you, Lindy.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 109-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Salt.
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Padilla.
Yeah.
Ms. Stern.
Yeah.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance.
Yes.
Mr. Constant.
Yes.
Ms. Solotel.
Yes.
Mr. Cross.
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Boland.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4H, assignment memorandum number AM 110-2023, recommendation of award for a contract with Connect LLC to provide custodial services to the municipality of Anchorage, Port of Alaska. What is the will of the body?
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant, seconded by Ms. Alatal. Is there any discussion? Ms. Alatal?
Thanks. So I'm reading the attached memorandum, and the bid award before us is $26,000. The next lowest bid is $42,000. I'm a little bit curious why this bid is so substantially lower than the other bids, and are we going to simply be looking at a contract amendment in the near future because this is artificially low? Thanks.
Through the chair, my first response would be that it's an ITV, so it's a low bid award. Rochelle Alger is here from purchasing. I don't know, Rochelle, if you could speak to any additional evaluation or analysis that we do with respect to an ITV or a quote.
Through the chair to Ms. Zolotel, ITVs are very black and white. It's a take it or leave it. And it's not the municipality's policy to interfere or otherwise, what's the word I'm looking for? Suggest how a company should bid. So we have to accept the bids as we receive them. And hopefully they are providing a clear and accurate bid.
Great. Thanks for that answer. I hope that there's a bit of consideration when the bids come in if they're going to meet the capacity and the need, particularly since janitorial services are something year over year. But we'll see what shakes out with this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Thank you, Ms. Elder. Is there any, sorry, Mr. Solt, I had you in the queue. Go ahead.
Maybe just some comments. So I really appreciate seeing the list of bidders, and that's helpful. Maybe encourage you as we get more of these, maybe a standard format of information. So if it is ITV, you see all the other bidders as well. And I think, following on Ms. Alato's comments, I think if we have bids where there's engineering estimate, sometimes low bidders thrown out because they're so far off or whatever, we need to make sure that we have an ironclad process, because it could get misinterpreted if you're throwing out bidders if you don't have a clear statement as to why that was done. A failure to comply with the bid is one, right? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solt. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Slow. Thank you, Melanie. I just misspoke. This was an RFQ, not an ITV. I apologize for that. This is also falls under the same rules and guidelines. It's a very black and white process. The list of bidders is on the memo on this one. The requirements come to purchasing from the requesting departments. Oftentimes, we will clarify that the requirements do meet their needs, and it is up to the departments to request that we toss out any RFQs or ITBs if they don't meet the engineer's estimate, or if they believe based on their historical knowledge of the work that it is under bid. So we do have those conversations with the departments.
Thank you, Mr. Solt. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Kent and Rochelle for answering questions on this one. I have no problem with this, but just sort of in general, I wonder if the policy of choose the cheapest, this is a bigger question, right, makes the most sense. And the reason I ask that is because I'm sure that someone who can do this job in $26,000 versus someone who could do it for $143,000, the reason that they can do it so cheaply is that they're probably not paying their workforce very well. And I will say that, I don't know if you guys remember this, it might be before Rochelle was here, but a year or two ago, maybe it was even 3, maybe members will remember, we were having a really hard time with janitorial services because we would get the lowest bidder, we would pick them, and then they would crumble and not show up and people would quit, and that's what happens if you don't pay people well, right? There's constant turnover. So I don't know if that's still going on, but I just wonder if sort of philosophically it makes sense to take into account, and I know you're bound by the code, so I'm not suggesting you did anything wrong, but sort of from our perspective, should we be thinking about how we evaluate bidders instead of just the lowest? And I guess I'd be interested if that phenomenon is still going on with janitorial services.
Through the chair to Member Quinn Davidson, I can't speak to what's going on with janitorial services. We could sure find out. Broadly speaking, I would say that in my experience managing construction contracts for 25 years and service contracts and supply contracts, there's always discussion about ITB versus RFP versus RFQ. A term of the art a few years ago was best value contracting. There's a significant effort that goes into that on the back end. So we go out for an RFP. There's quite a bit of work that goes into evaluating proposals. There's usually a staff of or panel of 3 to 5 people, and it's a several-week process. So then you weigh whether that is worth it for a $25,000 or $50,000 contract, or is it worth it for $1 million contract. Even in standard construction, typically the approach across the industry, DOT and others, is still ITB, and that does bring problems. When I worked for the Forest Service, we had problems with ITBs where we knew that a contractor who was a low bidder would likely not be able to perform. But if they had been responsive and responsible, we had little opportunity to not award to them. So we did, at the federal level, go to the best value approach, where you evaluate contractors on other qualifications as well as price. Again, I'm certainly open to looking at it. I think the question becomes is how much effort you put in on a $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 contract as opposed to a $1 million contract.
May I respond quickly? Sure. It looks like we have a good amount of time in this meeting. So I guess, thanks for that, Ken. And I guess I would say to my colleagues, I won't be around, but maybe some of you are interested in looking at that best value, because I could see for a really low contract it might not make sense, but I do think there's benefit to the muni to get folks who are responsive and can stick around and that we know are good contractors. And I don't know if Rochelle wanted to, she looked like she kind of wanted to say something, but don't feel like you have to.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. Through the chair, thank you for that acknowledgement. Personally, in my career, I actually prefer RFPs. I don't think that we should limit them, if you will, because it does give us an opportunity to negotiate with the bidder, and it gives us an opportunity to expand on the need, and I think that they are very valuable.
Can I just say one more thing? Sure. So I know you all got a lot on your plate, particularly you. If that's something you're interested in revisiting in the code or thinking about how we might change, I'm sure members would be interested in working on that with you, but I won't be here, so best of luck.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Ms. Alatal?
Thank you. Ms. Quinn Davidson raises a really good point, and I am interested in working on that. And if I looked forward to the next item, the janitorial contract there is significantly more, like 4 times as much. It's a $100,000 contract, and that one used an ITB process. And the scope may be significantly different, but it seems like it's quite a juxtaposition of the two items, especially since both are enterprise utilities. I think we just need to be really mindful that what we have found over the course of time is that we take the low bidder, we take the low quote, and then we're in a series of amendments. And I find that that's very unpredictable, and it is confusing, frankly, to have a contract consistently amended again and again and again. So I didn't mean for us to run down a rabbit hole with this a little bit, but I think it's really important that we think about not only the service we're contracting for, but the municipal time in doing this, potentially a series of contract amendments, and ensuring that we're really using our resources in the most efficient manner. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Alatal. Mr. Cross?
Yeah, perhaps it's a policy or procedures where if you have a bid that's more than 30% lower than the average or something like that, then it triggers an investigation to see that. Let's make sure nothing was missed. I mean, lowest bid, but yeah, then we don't end up with these surprise funding issues or lack of follow through on the contract. But typically there's not such huge discrepancies, so that's the only reason I think this one comes to attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. It's been a long time since we've had a work session on contracting. I remember we spent a lot of time going through ITBs and RFPs and the code. And while this conversation was playing out, I was trying to remember, and to Mr. Stoltz's point and others, like, isn't there some kind of trigger, whether it's a percentage or even an option to use best value? Because I know that there can be, someone can low bid and then anything that's over down the road, you get gouged. And so without, we don't get involved in contracts, and so we rely very, very heavily on the administration to determine the best value. And I'm hoping that, I won't be here either, but perhaps landing with some flexibility. I mean, and I can't remember what the code says on this, but obviously that balance between flexibility to get best value and transparency and clarity so that people know, what the rules are is important. But I guess I would be surprised if there wasn't some way that you couldn't. I know Ms. Elger said the department can ask to throw out the low bid. I think that's what you said. There's a mechanism. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there may be a situation where a contract was bid for several years, and then we had a little bit of inflation pop up over the last year or so, and so that would have an effect on the profitability of that contract if you were the bidder, and so they might come back and ask to have that reopened so they could adjust their original bid. And that's the situation we find ourselves in right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Colhuse?
Madam Chair, excuse me, to your comments. I'm not sure, and Michelle may know, I don't know if cost estimates are prepared for contracts like this. For construction contracts, we certainly do prepare cost estimates. And I don't think it's written in code, but there was a standing policy in years past that if bids exceeded either up or down the engineer's estimate by more than 10%, the department had to write a justification to the purchasing director. I don't know if that is still a practice, and I don't know if we do engineering estimates or any kind of cost estimate for, say, a janitorial contract. We do that for large construction projects.
Thank you. Anything to add? Ms. Elger?
Do you want me to answer you now or later? Okay. Thank you. Through the chair. Mr. Colhuse is correct. We do receive engineering estimates. I cannot confirm that we get those estimates for janitorial. It's something that I can look into and report back. I believe that we do, but again, I can't positively confirm that, but I'm happy to provide that information.
Thank you. I gotta not touch the microphone. Okay, seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 110-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Mr. Salt,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Revere, Mr. Perez Revere,
Yeah.
Ms. Jern,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Ms. Solotel,
Yes.
Mr. Cross,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now have before us item 4I, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 111-2023, amendment renewal of the non-encumbering contract with Aloha Cleaning AK to provide janitorial service to the municipality of Anchorage, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. What is the will of the body?
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Ms. Zalatal and seconded by Mr. Constant. Is there any discussion? Ms. Zalatal?
I think we pretty much discussed this, I started to bring it up. I think here, we have a not to exceed $109,000, which seems very different from the prior. And interestingly, if we look back, I think this is somewhat to Ms. Quinn Davidson's point, not only in terms of the wages perhaps paid to those who are providing the service, but that this one acknowledges that there's been an increase in the cost of services, which is something we're experiencing throughout the municipality. So to me, this item is much more fulsome for making the decision, quite frankly, than the previous item, because it provides a lot of context to kind of where we've been and where we're headed. So thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatal. Mr. Cross?
Yeah, on a lighter note, I remember touring the wastewater facility just 2 weeks ago, and I would charge a lot more to clean that building too, so.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to clarify the 15% increase in cost due to cost escalations was actually last year's amendment. It's not this amendment. And so I'm interested to understand what the impact of the 0.14% or 12.8% inflation is going to do. But it was, the information is here. It's really good to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Any other discussion? Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 111-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Mr. Salt,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Revere,
Yeah.
Ms. Jern,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Ms. Solotel,
Yes.
Mr. Cross,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Boland,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We now, and if folks on the line could please mute.
Muted.
We now have before us item 4J, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 112-2023, Amendment Number 2 to Contract 4400001103 with Beacon Occupational Health and Safety Services, Inc. to continue providing as-needed professional drug and alcohol testing for the municipality of Anchorage Human Resources Labor Department. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Ms. Hotel. About Mr. Constant and then Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Thanks. So separate from this specific item, I have a project that I'm working on that's intending to update our municipal drug testing policy. It was brought to my attention recently that our contract to Beacon restricts what testing is available, or they as a provider only have certain tests available And we had a candidate for the fire service who passed every test and every requirement. And they had already purchased all of his gear and equipment to set him up as newest probationary firefighter. And he failed to pass 2 screenings by Beacon because they were dilute. And after that point, the trigger was he can no longer come, it's presumed to be positive, he's out for a year at least. And he went and at his own expense provided a hair follicle test which was negative, but it was unable to be utilized as a valid test. And so we lost, after spending a ton of money, a very able candidate for the fire service. And so I have this project underway, started, it's Mr. Peterson. It has a little bit more of an aggressive edge. I want to flip the policy that we have at the muni to allow our municipal workforce, unless otherwise restricted by federal law, to participate in legal recreational activities in the municipality. And that would mean Parks and Rec staff don't get fired if they have a positive test for cannabis. And so, among other things. So I just put that on the table now, that this contract, it's already awarded, and I'm not a super fan of it. I'm glad that it will expire after next year's renewal so that we can go back out and get a company or push this company to deliver the services that we need. And it's regrettable that we lost a potential candidate because of black and white policies. You'll see something coming up soon.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Next is Ms. Quinn Davidson and then Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Constant, thanks for that update. That's really exciting. I didn't realize, it's interesting, like as a lawyer, I've never been drug tested. No one's ever asked me to take a drug test. I don't think. And I find, I'm thinking, I did intern at the White House, and I actually think they might have required it, but I can't remember. So that's what my 25-year-old brain is like. Did that happen 25 years ago? So it's really interesting to me who gets drug tested, and I find it to be sort of this, like, if you're a high-level employee, you don't get drug tested. But if you're not, you sometimes do. And I guess I'm just, first of all, thank you for having this meeting. I actually think it's helpful because this is a window into sort of some of the policies we have at the Muni, and it's nice to have this conversation, sort of to your point, Rochelle, about having, discussing with purchasing how we're making decisions, and it's just really helpful. So as a side note, but I have no problem approving this today, but another sort of philosophical question of who's getting drug tested at the Muni and why, and certainly if, and making sure that's equitable, and then making sure that, if pot is legal, just like alcohol is legal, people shouldn't be doing it on the job, just like they shouldn't be drinking on the job. But they can smoke pot if they want on weekends, I don't care. It's just like they can have a drink after work, I don't care. So if that's not our policy, it sounds like it's not, we need to change that because we're actually penalizing people for doing something that's legal, which to me makes absolutely no sense. So support your change, and if there are other changes beyond what Mr. Constant brings forward that we're not seeing, please let us know, and hope I'm here to vote for it, but
Working on it.
if not,
That's my time.
I wish you the best.
That is my time.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. I have Mr. Schultz. I put myself in the queue, and then Mr. Cross. Mr. Schultz?
Ms. Quinn Davidson, HR called, I want to if you're free.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I don't like fun, so I have no problem.
No, just a quick comment, and I know a lot of places don't have it. I know options to extend are common, but rarely do we ever put the criteria for the extension. And not that I'm necessarily asking for that, but it would be nice in this memo that's attached for them just to put a line or two saying, hey, we want to extend because they've done a great job, pricing remains the same or reasonable. So I don't know if you want to address it, Ms. Hall.
Through the chair to Assemblyman Sol. There's a inconsistency across municipalities. Some memos are written by the departments and with various people within those departments. Sometimes they're written by purchasing with assistance from the departments. So we have been in purchasing, writing our processes, and we're really trying to wrap our arms around these types of things so that we can create consistencies. Every time we seem to get going with creating some continuity, we run into a speed bump. So we're trying to continue to write these and get some consistency and continuity across the departments. So I agree with you. Also, from a professional standpoint, I don't like contracts that are any longer than 5 years. And if it is a 5-year contract, there needs to be a really good reason why it's a 5-year contract. So I would like to see those timelines reduced a little bit. Also, I'd like to see us talk about best value, which we haven't done in the past. We also don't talk about single sources, which I'd like to see us done. So there's a lot of really great things that the purchasing department can do, and we're really looking forward to that support.
Thank you, Mr. Stolt. And I had just put myself in the queue for a quick comment on the philosophical discussion piece of it, and that is, I understand that state law, while it may not necessarily drive the tests, it does have requirements concerning usage, and so like for law enforcement, I believe like for pot, it's also state. I wouldn't be surprised too if there's that federal level, but I think like for cannabis, I think it's a year for any law enforcement personnel who want to apply for a job. And so I don't know to what degree that necessarily drives the test, but I think it also has to do with other, in some cases, some licensing requirements too. But I think it's a good, I really appreciate what you brought up, Ms. Quinn Davidson, some of those issues about, how's it applied and when, and is it related to the nature of the job, whether it's a job that requires handling potentially a firearm or, having a CDL. Mr. Cross, and then Ms. Zalatel, and then Mr. Constant.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation we created with the legalization of marijuana, just to be sure. Because when I was in construction, we only got tested a handful of times. When you get to job, and if you crash the truck or you got hurt on the job, they were real quick to drug test you because they did not want to play workman's comp. Then I would hate to see individuals using, or I hate to see employers using a legal substance to avoid an employer's liability in a situation. So it's an interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Ms. Zalatel?
Thank you. So I'm looking at this assembly memorandum. It looks like the prior year's contract was for $80,000. This one is for $50,000. Is this sufficient capacity for able to fill our vacancies that we currently have within the municipality? Or are we going to find ourselves, if we are very fortunate and able to fill these vacancies if they require drug testing, are we going to find ourselves back needing to authorize additional funding? Because this appears to be a reduction from the prior year authorization.
Through the chair, members out, we have Raylene Griffith, acting HR director, in the room. And she may have staff with her as well who help answer the specifics of that question.
So Raylene Griffith, acting HR director, through the chair, we pulled data from several years prior, and we do believe that this will be a sufficient amount, even with the deduction for those pre-implement tests.
May I follow up, Madam Chair? Thanks. So I guess I'm not quite sure what's driving the reduction, given the vacancy rate in the municipality, and hopefully we're actively seeking to fill those vacancies, which I would think would drive potentially more testing, not less. So I'm having a bit of a disconnect there.
So through the chair, it is our intent to fill vacant positions. Again, looking back, just looking at the data, 5 years of data, we do believe that will be a sufficient amount as we were filling positions up to 5 years back.
Thanks. So were we underspent in previous years? Because it was 80,000 last year, it's 50,000. So we've been routinely underspent.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks. Just to put a cap on the conversation about the upcoming legislative package. Yes, Ms. LaFrance is exactly right that there are outside considerations. I hadn't heard of any state restrictions, but I'm well aware of 2 federal restrictions. One, you mentioned law enforcement, the second, commercial driver's license requirements, federal DOT. And so any project that comes forward would be very cognizant of those restrictions, but at the same time, to your point, Ms. Quinn-Davidson, it became apparent when we looked at the code that the drug testing policy code hasn't been updated since the last millennium, and really since the 90s in an effective way. And so this will be an effort to do exactly what you said, look more broadly at the code, make sure it's fair and equitable, and make sure it's non-invasive except for where it needs to be, and limited.
No, I was just gonna say, not to get too in the weeds, but I thought, oh, what a pun, an intentional pun.
The name's not the end.
Yeah, I can't get that much in the weeds. To Kevin's point about, say you're on the job and something happens, I think the problem, again, it's just because we have time, this isn't essentially this case, but I think the problem with marijuana testing is that it lasts in your system, sort of ironically, right? You could be doing some really hardcore drug and it would disappear via a drug test in a day or two, and then marijuana could last weeks. So it's so hard to test, if someone's gets in a car accident, you test them right away, they're positive, you can't tell if they smoked pot last night or 2 weeks ago, or I actually don't know the exact span, but I know that that's a problem. So anyway, interesting stuff, but best of luck to you.
The goal is to have it before you leave.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Quinn-Davidson. Ms. Zalatel? Sorry, one more question. It appears that this last amendment was through January 26, 23, is now 2/14/23. So do we have a gap in service? We should have known that this was coming, but I see the memorandum was for February 8th. So I'm glad it's here at this special meeting, but did we have a gap in services from the 26th to now? Thanks.
So through the chair, I'm going to defer to Beth on the timelines for that, but we have not paid the vendor, but we do not have a gap in service. We cannot pay the vendor without the approval of this today.
Elizabeth Volstead, Director of Employee Benefits, through the chair. So this contract was originally started through the DocuSign process on January 16th. It was declined by the municipal manager's office on January 21st as a result of the executive or of the emergency orders. So the intent was that this would be in place without a gap.
Okay, great. That's one of the reasons we could do a late on the table item as well. Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve AM 112-2023. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Mr. Solt?
Yes.
Mr. Presbyteriak?
Yeah.
Ms. Stern?
Yeah.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Ms. Zalatel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn-Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes 11-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Just a quick clarifying question on the matter that's already passed, but it's listed as the Human Resources Labor Department. Is that the actual name of the department? I've never seen it listed that way. This was previously.
So through the chair, the funding extremes do come under the labor part of the human resources department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Bullhays.
Through the chair to Mr. Constant, I think that probably that appropriately should have probably said Human Resources Department, Labor Division.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bullhays. That brings us to audience participation. Are there any members of the public here who would like to participate? If so, please come forward. I don't see anyone. Next, assembly comments. I will go ahead and start on the phone. Ms. Dern, any comments?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Dern. Mr. Presverdia, any comments? Mr. Rivera, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Peterson?
No comment, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Solt?
No comments.
Thank you, Mr. Solt. Mr. Boland?
Thank you, Madam Chair, no comments.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thanks to you all for being here. Raylene, thank you for accepting the acting director position. Kent, Michelle, thank you guys for doing what you're doing. It's nice to be here talking about how we can collaborate and move forward and ideas for new legislation. Feels like a really nice environment. So thank you for being here for that. And we look forward to talking with Kirsty more not next week, in 2 days at our Budget and Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Cross?
Happy Valentine's Day, and let someone know you love them.
Like Kevin did.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Ms. Alatel?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to you all for being here. I'm glad we had this special meeting. I'll be interested to see if we need additional special meetings moving forward with regard to can we get into a bit of a rhythm around this, around the regular meetings. So I'll stay tuned for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Alatel. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. So there was a nexus of two conversations, I think, that relate to the emergency ordinances, purchasing and boards and commissions. And that is the drug testing AO that I'm discussing right now. By the code, personnel policy changes have to go through the Human Resources Commission, I think it's called, and then the Personnel Board. We currently have 1 out of 5 members on the Human Resources Commission, and thus, as the Personnel Board is a subcommittee of the Commission, we have no personnel committee. And so I am working separately on a code change that allows, if there isn't a panel board and commission, that we can waive and make it assert that we can waive that stop along the way. We have done that, but we've heard some conversation where we can or we can't, depending who you talk to. And so there isn't going to be an opportunity to run this policy change by a personnel board because we don't have it. And so practically speaking, governance needs to continue and policy changes will continue. So we'll be bringing this forward with the best review that we possibly can. It's going to be limited because we don't have that proper place.
And we have some time, so Ms. Quinn Davidson, did you have a question?
I was just going to add to what Mr. Constant said, for Chris, since I guess I've been calling other people first names, that we, both Felix and Meg and I, when we worked to put together the proposal to add Juneteenth and Indigenous Peoples Day, that was supposed to go to the Personnel Committee, and since it's non-existent, essentially, functionally, we had to waive that requirement. You'll see that in the proposal before you all. And then similarly, for adding a month of parental leave to the new code for municipal employees, we had to also waive that. So yeah, it's a problem, but we've opted to waive it in both those instances, so I think you could as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Thank you, Mr. Constant, and thank you all for being here today for this special meeting. I'm sorry, Mr. Pulis, did you have a question or?
I had a comment if it's okay.
It's not one. No, it's one.
I had a comment if it's okay.
We don't typically do that, but go ahead.
Well, not for discussion during the meeting, but when the meeting's over, I just wanted folks to know that many of you may not know, Ann Helzer, sitting back there, is the newly appointed municipal attorney. So I thought folks may want to take a chance after the meeting to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colhase. So I will wrap up with assembly comments and just thank you all for being here for this special meeting, to the members of the administration who made time to be here today, and also Mr. Colhase. I look forward to some follow-up conversation to Ms. Zalatel's point as to whether we should continue to schedule special meetings. I know some of the staff have gotten pretty skilled at doing the requirements for on-base to bring these items forward. So just a heads up, there may be more special meetings, and thank you to the members. I think that to the point about boards and commissions, that's a conversation. Obviously, we've got a special meeting scheduled for March that some people have been fondly calling the Florida Palooza. And one of the intents of the ordinance, the emergency ordinance that we passed, was to preserve the ability of boards to have quorum. And it sounds like in some cases it's definitely not happened, and that is an issue. So again, thank you all for being here today and for the collaborative work. We are now at adjournment. We are adjourned.